Feeling lost is universal. And being found can feel impossible. But on this podcast, we think following your passions just might be the key to finding your purpose and to finding who you are. Welcome to Lost and Found. Okie doke. So welcome everybody to Lost and Found. This is a new podcast that kind of explores the ideas of, finding and following your passions and your interests, whatever they might be, from creative things to maybe a little bit more, even, streamlined things. It doesn't really matter. Just following and finding those passions and things that make you happy. So today I am joined by Nick Faitos. So he is the founder and owner of StarBright Floral Design. And y'all have been around for 30 years now, right? You just celebrated your 30th anniversary?
Yep. It's been
That's
30
awesome.
long years, 30 great years.
Yeah, that's amazing. And can you talk a little bit about your business and where y'all are based and stuff?
Sure. Well, we are based in New York, and we're a flower shop. In very plain terms, that's what we do. I on a more dissected level, I like to think that we're more of a marketing organization, and the vehicle that we use to market is flowers. We're not necessarily a florist per se in the way that you would go to your neighborhood flower shop and pick up a few daisies or roses or whatever. Our business model is a little bit more skewed towards the corporate environment and large-scale events, corporate projects, human resources for larger organizations, and that sort of thing. But as much as I say that that's what we do, we are still housed in a retail storefront type space. It's rather large. It's huge, as a matter of fact, but it is what one would consider to be a retail space. And through our affiliations with all the different companies and organizations that we work for, naturally, all of those employees have people who work with them. And as word has gotten out over the last 30 years about the work we do, I suppose how great we are, and everything else about us, we've gained a retail following, which is mostly driven online, over the phone, and by email rather than walk-in clients. We do have some walk-in clients, but the bulk of our business is done through electronic means or by telephone.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that you feel like it was kind of by word of mouth that y'all sort of, gained a clientele and stuff. Around what year would you say that you all realized, okay, this is actually a really big thing? Because I look at your Instagram page and, you guys have a lot of followers. You're nearing 10,000. And I see, who is this? I see Blake Lively, was there, and people from different Broadway musicals and stuff that y'all have provided the backdrops for, and they're all beautiful. So yeah. Around what point did you say, okay, this is really big?
Well, when I started the company, which was in 1994, it was a theoretical experiment. I had barely quit my full-time job. In fact, I probably hadn't. And I wanted to experiment and see if my theory was true or if it would hold water. It took me about 6 months to prove to myself that it could potentially be a viable business. And I would say that it took about a year or two. It took a little bit less than a year before I hired my first employee. Okay. So there were two of us. And at that time, I actually hired my wife, and my wife was my business partner. And since then, just to fast forward and then go back,
Mhm.
my son has been my business partner now as a true business partner in the
Awesome.
business for the last 20 of the last 30 years. So the
Wow.
first 10 years, it was myself and my wife. I
Mhm.
like to joke and say that she retired. Um,
Mhm.
and so Stephen, who is my son,
Mhm.
one of my two kids, he stepped in, and he's now almost 40 years old and pretty much runs the business aside from the marketing on a full-time basis,
Nice.
which allows me to focus more on what I'm passionate about, which is marketing. Going back now,
Mhm.
so we had one employee, then we had two employees, and then we had my wife. um, and I would say that, without being very specific, just for the sake of accuracy, within 5 years we maybe had five employees. um,
Mhm.
and at that point, I saw that it was a viable engine that
Yeah.
had the potential to grow tremendously. Um, and it did. And right around then, as we're gaining our stature in the marketplace, and keep in mind that there's no social media at the time, and
Mhm.
I think Foursquare was really the only thing that was out there, and there was something called City Search. Um,
Mhm.
which was before the Yelp days, just to kind of give you an idea of the timing on this.
Yeah.
And and then the .com bubble burst, and that was in the late 90s. We had nine
Mhm.
eleven.
Yeah.
We grew through all of that. And beyond 9/11, then we went into the financial crisis.
Mhm.
We kept growing. And about once every decade, it seems like we're hit with something. Then came the pandemic, and now we're
Yeah.
on the side of that. Um, so, but that's basically what the evolution of the company was.
Mhm.
You mentioned Blake Lively, and I do my own PR,
Mhm.
so I don't have an agency that goes out and looks for opportunities for us.
Mhm.
I do that in house. It's fun for me. It's something I'm very excited about and
Yeah.
passionate. And our first opportunity in that realm, in that world, was with a gentleman named Chris Gardner. Now,
Mhm.
Chris Gardner is the real life person, who is the true story behind The Pursuit of Happiness, the
Oh,
movie.
okay. Yeah, yeah.
And uh, so Chris, who is now many years later a very good friend of mine, had come to the store in a collaboration that we had with AT&T Wireless.
Mhm.
And the videos that we shot and what we did was really cool, and it ended up on it's still on YouTube, and it's fun. I go back and look at it sometimes just to see my younger years when the
Yeah.
beard was white. uh, and so that was kind of the start.
Mhm.
But we always focused, and there's a couple of different areas that the company has focused on over the years. All have proven to be successful. We tried
Mhm.
some others that have not, but in the public relations realm, in press junkets, working with film premiere nights. We did the premiere at the Ziegfeld Theater when it was with the Wedding Crashers,
Mm.
when that came out.
Yeah.
And for the premiere, you'd normally set out a red carpet.
Mhm.
Um, well, we did a white runner the way you would have one at a wedding,
Yeah.
with an arch, the way that a bride and a groom would walk through, and all
That's
the
awesome.
and everybody walked through that to go into the theater for the premiere.
Mhm.
And we've done a lot of fun projects like that, the VMA Awards,
Wow.
fun things over the years,
Mhm.
and obviously not all at once. And one project seems to lend itself to another.
Mhm.
Um, we, from time to time, have the opportunity to become involved in projects that they call on us to be a part of, and and that's basically it. So yeah.
Yeah.
uh,
That's awesome. I mean, that's yeah, it's funny because you mentioned going into this interview, I thought that your passion would be, flowers. But then you said your passion is more marketing. So that's very interesting to me. So I'm wondering, with that background of you really being interested in the marketing side, why flowers then? Like, why did you choose floral design?
well, it was a transitional moment. And years later, the quote that I came up with was that I don't care if you're selling flowers or a sack of potatoes.
Yeah.
The principles of marketing remain the same.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a question of transitioning from one product to another. Now, in my case, yes, there was a natural appeal to
Mm-hmm.
the floral side of things, and there's no denying the fact that flowers were an attractive vehicle
Yeah.
in my instance. And the reason they were is because, and I feel like we're still in the leadership position today, 30 years later. Um, when you go to your neighborhood flower shop to buy flowers,
Mm-hmm.
it's not an environment that is welcoming uh, to a Fortune 500 company in a very white collar sense. In other
Mm-hmm.
words, Boston Consulting at Hudson Yards needs to create an experience for either their clients or their employees or something along those lines, or the Ernst and Young Entrepreneur of the Year Awards.
Mm-hmm.
These are not projects that the neighborhood florist, and nothing against anybody. I'm not suggesting that one is better than the other. It's
Mm-hmm.
just a different market segment. And
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
realized is that even, for example, to the concierge community in the New York City hotels, these are not places where the typical florist would focus their environment, their
Yeah.
marketing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It was put up a bigger sign, uh, display flowers that are fresh outside, let people come in and buy them. Okay.
Yeah.
And every
Yeah.
now and then they get to do a wedding or a funeral.
Mm.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
And it's just that when we came into the picture, and remember, this is when fax machines were the alternative communication method to a telephone,
Mm-hmm.
and there was no email. Websites were extremely primitive,
Mm-hmm.
and if at all. So we started from the ground up, and in a sense and in a way that allowed us to build, to create our building blocks
Mm-hmm.
as time went on, without having to do it all at once. If you came into this market today to
Yeah.
try to replicate what we did, and certainly I invite anybody to try it, and I'm sure there's a way to do it, but
Mm-hmm.
you would have to do things all at once. You'd have to build a website. You'd have to get your email. You get to get your social media. You got to get your LinkedIn.
Yeah.
You've got to find clients. All of it
Mm-hmm.
has to be done at once in order for you to become viable. When we
Mm.
came in 30 years ago, this was all starting to happen.
Yeah.
So it was very easy for us to grow with it and to
Mm.
use it as it came out,
Mm-hmm.
rather than to have to bundle it and say, okay, today I'm a florist, tomorrow I need to have all this in my toolbox.
I see. That's interesting. I mean, I feel like that in and of itself is, something that maybe somebody who wants to do something like this and follow, follow something that interests them, it could kind of give them pause probably, right? Because you do have to do everything at once. But do you think what what are I guess do you have any suggestions for somebody who's going into it like that? Like, from your marketing perspective, I guess, and your perspective as an entrepreneur. I know that you
Well,
didn't do it that way, but I'm wondering if maybe you would have any advice for somebody?
I do. Can
Yeah.
we cut for a minute?
Sure.
I,
Okay.
yeah, look, every decade, every generation, every time provides new opportunities,
Mhm.
uh, and new chances for somebody to do what has not been done before, and times to think things through. Is the age of the entrepreneur over? No, not by any means.
Mhm.
That's a definite no. Um, can somebody do exactly what I did 30 years ago today? No, I would not recommend it. And if I was to do that today, although I don't have that business model in my head, I'm
Yeah.
sure that I would do it entirely differently. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and it comes down to every time in our lives has different opportunities. Now,
Mhm.
what I did and what I continue to do, and like I said, whether it's a sack of potatoes, whether it's flowers, whether it's anything else, it
Mhm.
doesn't matter. What I looked for and what transitioned me into the floral industry was that it's a product and a service that I could offer to a potential client base without having any competition. Okay. And the key to being able to be successful at something is to trailblaze the environment. Okay.
Yeah.
Take something that's existing, take something that people love, want, need, and use. Okay.
Mhm.
Present it in a different way or present it to a different audience. And it doesn't
Yeah.
matter what the product is or the
Mhm.
service. And, I've had many opportunities to speak to industry groups. And what I always come back to as a common denominator is that I did not come into this industry, okay, to become a florist and to
Mhm.
take a slice from a fixed size pie. Okay.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to wedge in there and take somebody else's business. My
Mhm.
goal was to make the pie bigger.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And once you've made the pie bigger, of course you deserve a slice.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but the pie becomes bigger for everybody.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
So
And
now, like, everybody else might have flooded into what you did, and so now someone
yeah,
else might have to come along and, increase the size of the pie again in a different
exactly,
way. Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
Mhm.
And it happens all the time. And I respect those who make a legitimate, honest effort to
Mhm.
provide a great service at a value-based price and take care of their clients
Mhm.
uh, versus the ones who come in opportunistically, excuse
Mhm.
me, come in for the opportunity and say, "Hey, this is a fast buck. I can make it
Yeah.
and go."
Yeah.
And that obviously hurts all of us, and none of us want that.
Do you think that's on the rise nowadays? It seems like it might be with, social media and stuff like that. It seems like it might be, but it's hard to tell. Like, from your perspective, do you think it's the same, or has it increased?
Uh, it could seem like it's increased. I don't have the data to prove it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
but I will tell you that crises like 9/11,
Mhm.
like the financial crisis, like the dot-com bubble, and like the pandemic,
Yeah.
they have a way of sifting out those who don't belong in the professional space. You
Mm.
know, when interest rates, as an example, that's not related to flowers, when interest rates were at a very, very low level and everybody wanted to buy a new house, there were builders all over the place that had never built nothing.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
people building houses that couldn't build a doghouse, and but what happened is, you know, the market, the industry, the environment, the economy, it all worked against them. Okay,
Mhm.
rightfully so,
Yeah.
and those who are true professionals and care about their business and are nurturing something that's long term, that is possibly something they're going to pass on to another generation, the
Mhm.
ones who care succeed. And
Mhm.
um, and many against all odds. And certainly it's not something that I can say statistically is one way or the other.
Yeah.
Uh, but um, I don't care about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely it's a good thing to, I guess, keep in mind, that, how you feel that, pretty much if you do care about what you're doing and if you're not just in it for the wrong reasons, the money or whatnot, you're in it for, your interests and your passions and the benefits of your clientele or whomever it might be, that most likely those are the ones that will succeed. And that's definitely very reassuring, I think. But so kind of going back to before you mentioned, that at a certain point when you were still working at your other your full-time job before you started this business officially, and you said you were kind of like in between and stuff, and you still hadn't fully left that job yet, possibly. Um, so I'm wondering what was the catalyst that what told you inside, okay, this is the time, versus maybe, I don't know, 5 years later, or maybe even never. Like, what really made you take that step?
Well, well, there are times in your life where one could argue that the stars are aligned,
Yeah.
or that the moment is right.
Mm.
Uh, and when you look at your life and your levels of responsibility, and what you've accumulated, what you can risk, what you can't, I was what I consider to be what I considered at that time to be at a moment where I could take my last real chance on something
Hmm.
before reaching an age where my responsibilities would be so great that I would
Yeah.
not be able to just walk away from it. Or at least
Yeah.
that's how I felt at the time. Maybe 10 years later, I might feel differently, but I had
Hmm.
two very young kids.
Yeah.
I had a mortgage, and we were, as a family, at a point where if we're going to do something, we're going to do it now. Okay.
Hmm.
Because once the kids go to school, okay, once the responsibilities and the expenses are different than they are now, um, are you going to be able to take that step?
Yeah.
And I really believe that there's, and looking back, I would say that maybe I was even a little bit foolish. Okay. Maybe I was it worked out well, no
Yeah.
doubt. But maybe I was at a moment where I shouldn't have taken that chance, but I
Mm.
did, you
Yeah.
know.
Hmm.
But the longer you wait, the harder it is to take that chance.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
And so you mentioned that your wife worked with you, and she was kind of your first employee. So I take it that was she fully on board, or it was just you did this, and she's like, okay, well, fine, I'll go along with it too.
Well, no. What's funny about that is that, uh, and you're in New York, so you kind of know the geography a little bit. Uh,
Hmm.
Lived in Long Island. We still do.
Yeah.
In Comac, if you're familiar with the town.
Okay.
And About 5 years before I made any transition, my wife opened up a small flower shop in Long Island,
Oh,
in a
okay.
neighboring town, but that was like a real flower shop.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Like
uh,
neighborhood flower shop. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. In a
Hmm.
bedroom community, not much traffic. It was, I'm not going to say it was destined to fail, but it didn't have the demographics that it
Okay.
needed to succeed. Uh,
Yeah.
and, and that was opened at my encouragement, on the
Hmm.
basis that I always brought flowers home, and I thought that flowers were how difficult could it be? It's a cute business. You're around
Yeah.
flowers all day. What's nicer? You know, Little did I know what goes on behind it.
I've
So,
worked in a florist briefly, and it was stressful. It was a lot.
so, but that was how she started,
Yeah.
um, and and it was fine. But we could never make a go of it. And I tried to help
Mm.
as much as I could, but I found myself leaving work, coming to the shop,
Mhm.
okay, and liking what was going on there more than liking what I did. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's how I kind of learned and transitioned. So
Mm.
as one was driving itself down, I was
Yeah.
gearing something else up. And
Mm.
on the gear up, what happened was, okay, we said, okay, how are we going to do this? And I said, okay, look, I'm going to try something. And I literally, you said you're in Queens?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Um, I set up an office literally in Woodside. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
And, and I had one room that was tiny and it was just me. And I would broker the flowers to other flower shops. So I would take orders and I had a deal with flower shops where they would deliver my orders with my private label delivery ticket so nobody would know that I didn't have a shop. And that was the the twist at the time. Now, as you know, Manhattanites are very prejudiced to the 718 area code. So, so I had to figure out a way. How am I going to be in Woodside? Okay, serve Manhattan, which is where my prospects were, but not reveal my phone number.
Yeah.
So I got an 800 number.
Okay.
Okay. So my 800 number, which still is live today for anybody that still uses it, but my 800 number pretty much disguised my location
That's
until people
awesome.
got to know me. And
That's funny.
I literally would go on appointments in Manhattan, going to offices, and I had one of those. You may have seen them in a museum. Those really old Panasonic phones, the original cell phones, the ones that
My parents had those. Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
that looked like a suitcase. I had one of those, and
Yeah.
I would call forward the 800 number to the 718 number to my cell phone, and I would literally be standing on Fifth Avenue and 46th Street or wherever, and the phone would ring, and I'd drop the suitcase on top of a garbage can, pull out a legal pad, take an order, okay, and then give it to the flower shop. So
Oh my God.
that was that, you know, and I was doing this constantly between appointments. And just to put it into perspective, September of '94 is when we started. Valentine's Day, February of '95, unforgettably, we took 17 orders. Okay. Now, put that into perspective to Valentine's Day 2024, where we did over 1,500 orders.
Wow. Oh
Okay.
my goodness.
And, so, but when I was by myself,
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot for just,
yeah,
like 1, 2
yeah,
people to do. Yeah.
exactly. And I'm trying to figure things out. And I don't know what I'm doing. Okay. But it worked out.
Yeah.
In fact, unforgettably, Steelcase Furniture, which is a office supply furniture company, was my first real corporate account, and the first people that I started working with. And then came the Marriott Marquis, the hotel,
Wow.
the
Yeah.
concierge
Yeah.
desk. And all of a sudden from there, you start gaining confidence, you figure out what you're doing,
Yeah.
and you're growing, but they're baby steps. And every step you're taking, and at every turn that you take, where you do something you haven't done before, but you do it successfully, you now have that in your toolbox, and it gives you confidence.
Yeah.
And as your confidence grows, you grow. As you grow, your company grows, and as your company grows, it gives you a chance to follow your dreams.
Yeah. I mean, I'm interested in the concept of baby steps, like you said. So that kind of leads to the thought of maybe obstacles and like making mistakes. So I'm wondering if there were any mistakes that you made along the way, early on, even where you kind of maybe stepped back and were like, should I do this? Should I keep going? Or were you always, just on the upward trend? You were fine with any mistakes and overcoming them.
I have never made a mistake in my life. No, I'm kidding.
Well, okay. Sorry, folks.
No, mistakes are part of learning.
Yeah.
I'll never forget a quote that I heard once. I don't know where it came from, but somebody said that learn from the mistakes of others because you don't have time to make them all yourself.
Mm, yeah.
And you really do have to try to learn from others' experiences. You have to learn to listen. You have to be teachable. You have to read books. You have to understand the concepts of what really are you after. And yes,
Yeah.
along the way, there will be stumbling blocks. There are going to be decisions that you're going to have to make, and you might not make the right decision.
Yeah.
Whether you borrow too much money, or you spend the money you borrowed too fast, or you overextended yourself on your fixed expenses when you shouldn't have, or you advertised on the wrong platform. It could be a number of things and a number of decisions where you might make the wrong mistake, and that's okay as long as you're willing to learn from the mistake.
Yeah.
and and you go back and say, okay, what did this mistake cost me? Okay, I'm not going to give up.
Yeah.
Um, and a perfect example of that is I ride motorcycles,
Oh, cool.
and I, once or twice I fell down. Okay,
Hmm.
and that's okay. Um,
Yeah.
and thankfully, never anything serious. But the lesson there is when you do fall,
Hmm.
okay, the last thing you want to do is wait 6 months before you get back on a motorcycle. You want to get back
Hmm.
on a motorcycle as soon as you're physically able to do it again. Okay,
Hmm.
because you want to rebuild your confidence.
Yeah.
Okay. You
Yeah.
want to capitalize on what you know and remember what you don't know, put it into your subconscious so you never drive down that path again.
Yeah.
And life goes on. And the truth is, sometimes mistakes are not overcomable. Sometimes
Hmm.
you will have to take a step back and say, okay, I tried this, it did not work. Okay,
Hmm.
that's okay. What do I do next? And how do I apply what I learned did not work to what I want to do? And that's when you'll transition from selling flowers to selling light bulbs,
Yeah.
or to finding a different service, or
Yeah.
correlating, or going from one area to another, but always keeping in mind the entrepreneurial lessons and the business management lessons that you learned in A, B, C, D, and then eventually in E. I know
Hmm.
many, many people who were not successful until they ran their fifth business. I know others
Yeah.
that equally did not succeed until their fifth business and then lost it all and had to start over again.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Colonel Sanders started Kentucky Fried Chicken with his first Social Security check.
Wow.
Seriously. Uh, and after he was jailed, by the way, for skipping out on child support payments because he couldn't afford to make them. So he
Mm.
comes out of jail. He was a short order cook at a restaurant,
Hmm.
and he gets a Social Security check, okay, and looks at it and says, I'm too young to be able to say that the government is going to take care of me for the rest of my life and I can't do anything from now on. And
Mm.
that first Social Security check and his secret recipe made the KFC empire. So, there's stories like that
Yeah.
all around us.
Yeah.
There's Walt Disney, there's Thomas Edison, there's, great minds, great people,
Yeah.
all of whom have failed
Hmm.
before they succeeded.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think it's part of the process, without a doubt.
Mhm. It's funny that you mentioned Walt Disney. My eyes lit up because I'm a huge fan of, like, that whole story of his.
Uh,
And yeah, it's true. I mean, he did fail multiple times. Like, he borrowed money from everybody and, like, even the opening day of Disneyland, there's recordings of it where people's feet were sticking to the ground because it was so hot and, like, things weren't done, and it just was like a total failure, really. But still, I mean, it grew into what it is today, and it's like,
that's right.
everybody knows the name. But I'm wondering, you mentioned all these people, and I think you should include yourself in this too, because um, there's this certain spirit, like you said, the entrepreneurial spirit. But I'm wondering, uh, do you think that do you think everybody has that? Do you think everyone should try something like this? Or do you think there's just some people are born with that spirit and some people are just not?
Well, uh, born with a talent.
Yeah.
Some people will argue that it could be true, and it could be in some people's DNA more than in others. I feel that it's more of a learned skill
Mm.
that can be acquired rather than something that is bestowed upon you.
Yeah.
And the you, you've heard of the born salesman, okay?
Mhm.
You've never heard of the born doctor, okay?
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, I believe that with the proper concentration and the proper willingness, uh,
Mhm.
both skills could be acquired. Is it for everybody? Probably not.
Yeah.
but not for the reasons many people think. I think that the biggest reason, the biggest obstacle that needs to be overcome is the absolute commitment. When
Mhm.
I started StarBright, I had done a few other things in my life. Obviously, I was in my mid to late 30s.
Yeah.
And at that point, I said, okay, this is my last dance.
Mhm.
Okay. I did not know where it was going to go. I did
Yeah.
not know what it was going to become. I did not have the vision then to be able to say that it would be what it is now.
Yeah.
Certainly not. But I knew that this was the last thing I wanted to do. Okay.
Mm.
And I was committed to making it work. And if you go into something with the level of commitment
Mhm.
that says that I'm going to give it everything I've got, your chances are much greater. And
Mhm.
what I certainly tell people a lot of times that you don't want to be involved with something, you want to be committed to it. And the
Yeah.
difference between involvement and committed and commitment, you have to
Mhm.
think of a bacon and egg sandwich. And the reason you want to think of a bacon and egg sandwich is because the chicken is involved, but the pig is committed.
Mm. I was like, "Where's this going?" That's hilarious. I
So
see what you mean, though. That's funny.
so if you go into something not half-hearted, okay,
Yeah.
and if you're not going to predict every turn in the road, you're not going to predict every rain shower, you're not
Mhm.
going to find every slippery slope in advance, and don't try to wait for all the lights to turn green before you leave the house.
Mm.
But when you do leave, um, you know know that you're going to reach your destination and know that you're going to do whatever it takes along the way, no matter the mistakes, no matter the obstacles, no matter the competition. You might
Mhm.
change course. That's okay.
Yeah.
Changing your mind is fine. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, Changing your commitment is not. You know,
Mm.
and if you have the right chemical balance, both in your mind and in your surroundings,
Mm.
and the right support group, you will succeed, or at least you're going to increase your odds tremendously.
Yeah, so it's funny that you mentioned your support group because that's kind of where I was gonna ask another question. Of course, you mentioned this is a family business now. You had your wife before, who was running it with you. You have your son now who's running it with you. So before any of this, in your earlier life, were there any people who kind of just stood by you and supported you in such a way that it kind of gave you this confidence later on in life to do something like this?
I would have to unequivocally say yes,
Mhm.
absolutely. There have been I went to school at the University of Florida down in Gainesville,
Mm.
and I um, uh, I put myself through school selling encyclopedias door to door. Okay. Um, I did not have the means to pay for my tuition. Okay.
Mhm.
Not that school was as expensive then as it is now,
Mm.
but I still didn't have the means.
Yeah.
And that was a good thing.
Mhm.
And I was recruited by a company out of Nashville, Tennessee called Southwestern. And I literally packed my bags 4 summers in a row. And I was in with other students in groups, knocking on 30 doors a day in farm country in Iowa, in Pennsylvania, in Ohio. And not only did it teach me a lot about America, okay,
Mhm.
but it was through my managers and my coaches and the people that I was surrounded by. I learned a lot
Mm.
about myself. Okay, and while my college buddies were all recreating on the beach in Fort Lauderdale, I was in and
Yeah.
that didn't sound too good. But
Mm.
I'll tell you something. And this is at a time when I guess minimum wage was about $1.75. I would come back to school in September with a big old fat $5,000 check in savings from my
Yeah.
summer job. Okay,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
was unheard of in those days for that amount of time. But it wasn't, and of course that money stretched to pay a lot of my college bills, right?
Yeah.
But it also taught me a lot about myself. it taught me about, commitment, being a self-starter. I felt like when I graduated college, I was so far ahead of the game in terms of personal experience, that I was able to do things, um, and still to this day apply what I learned then as
Yeah.
principles to what I do now. So yes,
Mm.
there have been a tremendous number of people even there, and then after that, I could probably scroll down a list of names of people who have been influential in my life and have helped me along the way. And what's interesting about that is that, and I say this very sincerely to both you, your audience, and anybody who thinks about an entrepreneurial background.
Yeah.
The greatest thing about those people is
Hmm.
that none of them ever knew that they had that influence on me.
Mm.
And, I'd like to go back and find them and thank them. And a couple of them I'm still friends with.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is those little tidbits of life, those little
Mm.
moments when you learn those big lessons, okay,
Hmm.
from someone who has absolutely no idea how long lasting that moment is going to be to the person that you're involved with. And
Mm.
now, I'm in my mid 60s. I enjoy what I do. I'm not ready to put the brakes on anything, but I also feel like I'm in the storytelling years of my life. I feel like I'm in the give back years. I feel like I'm at a period where what's been given to me, I can give
Hmm.
to somebody else.
Yeah.
And I can
Yeah.
give it fearlessly because I'm confident about what I'm doing. I'm not worried about anybody stealing my ideas. I'm not worried about somebody who's going to listen to your podcast and say, and the next day say, "Oh, I think I'm going to open up a flower shop and compete with Nick, and I'm going to
Yeah.
blow him out of the water." That's not going to happen, you know.
Hmm.
And I don't mean that's not going to happen from an ego standpoint. I mean that I'm not worried about that happening because that's not the stage in my life or the stage of our company's life to
Yeah.
where I'm going to say, that's something that concerns me. In fact, just to kind of close out on that thought,
Yeah.
although I can't talk forever, um, but to close out on that one thought, Justine, I can tell you that at least three people who were former employees of StarBright, okay,
Hmm.
have opened stores subsequent to the career that they had at StarBright. Okay,
Yeah.
um, I help them, I work with them, I consult them, and I want them to succeed. So
Yeah.
it really is an important part of what all of us do.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it seems like it definitely seems kind of crucial because, I listen to podcasts as well and stuff, and entrepreneurs on those podcasts speak about the same sort of thing you're speaking about now, like how it's not really about it's like it's about competition, but not in a way where you hope everybody else fails and you're the only one who succeeds,
Right.
So yeah. So it's definitely nice to hear.
Yeah. No. A very very good friend of mine in the business. Um, we had a beer a while back, and I said to him, "You know, I love you like a brother, but I'm going to beat you like a dog."
But that's even very brotherly too, like it's sibling
Exactly.
rivalry. Like
It's and that of course that's a joke,
yeah.
but the point is that as time goes on and you become more comfortable with your skin, okay,
Mhm.
and the more you become comfortable with yourself and what you're doing, the more uh, confident you are in your abilities and where you're going, the more you're willing both to share, to give back, to try things that you've never done before, to experiment. And, you know, I, this may surprise you, but the world has changed in the last 30 years. Um, and and it will continue to change for the next 30 years. It ain't,
Mhm.
none of this is stopping,
Yeah.
and that's good. Okay, so someone from my end, in my generation, in my position, okay,
Mhm.
has to still be able to be willing to be teachable, okay,
Mm.
to be willing to learn, okay,
Yeah.
and to be able to adjust to the way things are done now,
Mhm.
okay. um, it's it's just part of life and part of what all of us, the evolution of things will never stop. Okay.
Mhm.
And if you think it will, just get off the merry-go-round,
Yeah.
let somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an interesting point because, you know, I've heard people, who are my age who, maybe are just getting out of school. I mean, I've been out of school for a few years now. But even younger people who have just graduated, friends, family members, or even, all the way to people who are, in the older generations. You have some who are done with learning, like they're like, nope, don't want to learn anything anymore. I'm done with school. I wanna leave that life behind me, and then you have some people who seem to be more vibrant and, like, full of life who are like, "No, I wanna learn." Like, that it's just a process of life, and I need to know more things and always be, not advancing. What's the word I'm looking for?
More
Evolving.
curious. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm wondering, do you have any advice about how to like, I guess, foster that kind of mindset? Because it does seem crucial to not just to following your interests, but also just to being a full person. And I've come across so many people who don't want to learn anymore.
Yes. Sadly so. Uh,
Mhm.
and I agree with you fully. And I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but as you seek your own dreams and as you look for your own successes, look at those people and say, I'm so happy that I don't have that much competition.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and I'll tell you something else. And what I'm saying is a bit lighthearted, but
Mhm.
really what it comes down to is when in my first career job after
Yeah.
college. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, I had one goal. Okay. I knew that I was not the brightest person in the room. I knew that I lacked a lot of experience that others that were much older, much more experienced than I, you know, could do a much better job than I did. Okay.
Mhm.
But there's one thing that I knew that I could do that none of them could. And that was that I could be the first one in the office, unlock the door, and I could be the last one out of the office at night and lock the door. Okay.
Yeah.
So I theorized that if I put in more effort, okay,
Mm.
I would catch up faster. Okay.
Mhm.
So if everybody around you is putting in a 40-hour week and you're putting in one third more time, example, 60-hour week, and this is my own experience. I'm not advising everybody to do this, but that's what
Yeah.
happened to me. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
if you think about it, um, I'm going to be where you are now in one third less time
Mhm.
because I'm putting in one third more effort.
Mhm.
So what's going to take you 6 years will take me 4,
Yeah.
simply on time commitment. Um,
Yeah.
and there has to be, an open mind, a willingness to want it.
Mm.
There has to be a thirst, okay,
Mhm.
and the thirst has to be far greater than than anything you've ever known before, in order to be willing to do what it takes to succeed.
Mhm. Yeah. Was there ever a time for you where that thirst kind of like, um, I guess maybe where you felt like you couldn't necessarily quench it and it caused you like maybe some internal turmoil or something?
Yes, and recently, in fact,
Oh.
in the sense that my personality, my makeup, um, as weird as it might be sometimes, is more. I'm more focused on taking an idea,
Mhm.
nurturing it into becoming a baby,
Mhm.
um, putting that baby on a pedestal, letting that baby learn how to walk and crawl.
Mm.
Okay. But I'm not the kind of person who's interested to running something once it's fully operational and mature. Okay.
Mm.
Uh,
Yeah.
I'm not the ops guy who's going to look at the numbers, who's going to, adjust the payroll, who's going to do the buying, who's
Yeah.
going to do the day to day things that, you know, are necessary, but to me mundane and
Yeah.
not the things that I enjoy. Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the greatest gift that I've been given is that my son, who decided to join my business, and now it's ours, has the extreme opposite mindset. So he's good at the
Yeah.
things that I'm not good at. Okay.
Hmm.
So what's happening is in the evolution of StarBright, okay,
Yeah.
um, I have stepped back from a lot of the day to day responsibilities,
Yeah.
um, which is what's kept my interest going. If I
Mm.
had not stepped back, there might have been a failure.
Mm.
Understand, we have over 35 employees now. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a very mature organization that needs a lot of nurturing and care that my personality cannot give.
Hmm. Yeah. So
So,
you like to like create the business and like start it and like go through the challenges, but once it's established, you're like, okay, I'm ready for the next thing, kind of.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. In a way, yes. And what
Hmm.
happens, and this is very typical in what you and I are doing right now, is that am I working? Not really. I'm enjoying myself, but am
Okay.
I being productive for my business?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
And my goal is to reinvent Starbright every
Mhm.
single day with new experiences and with new ways to bring freshness to the table
Mhm.
uh, that was not there yesterday, and that will keep me excited in Starbright because I'm not leaving Starbright. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm just going to recreate opportunities and new windows and new avenues and new excitements every single day. Um, you know, Being able to bring Blake Lively into our store, that was a new, fun, wow moment experience.
Yeah.
We're doing the New York Wine and Food Festival next month in New York City.
Oh, yeah.
And, and we're doing opening day with Martha Stewart. That's
Oh,
exciting.
awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if who's her sidekick, Snoop Dogg or something like that.
Yes.
Uh,
I think they're best
I don't know.
friends.
Yeah, I don't know if he's going to be there, but the fact that we're going to be in a private club with Martha Stewart,
Yeah.
and I get to be an invited guest in that environment turns
Mhm.
me on. You know,
Yeah.
so and that's the beauty of this business, is that it has many different ways that you're able to market it,
Mhm.
and it's never stagnant. And you can
Yeah.
reinvent yourself every day, but still have the same core product.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm a little bit like you in that way too. I mean, I haven't of course I haven't started a very successful business, but like in the mindset of
You're doing it.
in the mindset of kind of like, I have trouble with the mundane and like, repetition, just the same thing every day and out and out. Like that drives me kind of a little bananas. And when I try to describe this feeling to people, I think a lot of times people say like, oh, that's just life, like that's just what it has to be. You have to get used to it and stuff. And I'm like, am I crazy? Like I can't take it. So it's
No, you're
nice to
not
hear
crazy.
that I'm not the only one.
You're definitely not crazy.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, you mentioned again that your son deals with that side of it, and that you feel very lucky about that. So I'm wondering if that wasn't the case. You said maybe there would be a failure or something like that. Um, what do you think you would have done? Do you have any ideas?
Well, I've never been in real life had to answer that question, so I
Yeah.
honestly can't give you a predictive answer.
Yeah.
But I would have figured it out.
Hmm.
I'm sure that there would have been a hire along the way. I would have brought
Yeah.
somebody on board. I'm sure that I would have made a few more mistakes than what I have made.
Yeah.
Uh, Maybe I would have avoided certain mistakes that Stephen and I, during our decision making time, maybe did make. And if I had somebody more experienced from the get go, maybe that would have been different.
Hmm.
You can't really tell. All I can really say is that right now, where we are, based on what we have, we're in a phenomenal spot. And
Yeah.
I'm very
Yeah.
fortunate to have had that.
Yeah. So it seems like you kind of just you're of the mindset of you just go with you kind of roll with the punches. Like, whatever situation you're presented with, you just figure out a solution and then move forward. Right. You never really stop. You never stop and just quit and give up. And I think a lot of people I think it would be helpful, useful information to a lot of people because not that a lot of people do quit, but I think a lot of people have trouble envisioning that they could succeed after failures, or even not failures, but like obstacles coming up. And I think that is
Yeah.
why people kind of do quit after a while and they just go back to something that is mundane, possibly.
Well, or something that is not their dream, and they're,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to digress a little bit, and I
Sure.
don't know how we're doing on time, but just to kind of give you a little bit of some thought on that. In the early days, when Stephen and I used to go to work together, now he's married, and we go our separate ways and show up at the same place. But
Hmm.
in the very early days, we would be in the car driving on the northern state, and we would be laughing and having a good time. And it's 7 o'clock in the morning, and there's traffic all around us, and it's taken us 2 hours to get into the city. And I said, Stephen, says, what? Look at all the cars around us. Everybody is wearing a frown.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, everybody is wearing a frown, and we're among them, laughing our heads off. Okay,
Yeah.
and you know what would you rather have? And at the end of the day, that's the you know that's the question that people need to ask. Now,
Hmm.
in terms of failure versus success, I can't tell you how many people, okay, I personally know who failed or who quit,
Yeah.
okay, after a certain amount of fails or stumbles or whatever you want to call them.
Hmm.
um, and had they stuck it out for one more chance, one
Yeah.
more opportunity, okay, things would have turned around. They
Mm.
just gave up a little bit too soon.
Yeah.
Or on the other side, where there's a legitimate failure, and yeah, businesses do go out of business, and
Yeah.
people don't continue doing what they're doing. But um, when they revert back and they say, I'm not very good at being an entrepreneur.
Mm.
Okay. So they never give themselves a second chance. They never try something else. They never keep
Mhm.
those wheels spinning.
Yeah.
And what do? They go out and they pass out a resume and hope that they get stuck behind a desk somewhere where they can hide for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
Okay. And collect a check.
Yeah.
So
That's for me, it's true because that's what I see from, people who I spend, a lot of my time with, like friends, family, that everyone seems to sort of fall into that category of, either they are thinking about trying something else or they never even thought about it. So they're just like stuck in the repetitive 9 to 5 job, collecting the check, like you said. But you could tell that they're not happy. I feel then that's kind of was a huge catalyst for me to starting this because I noticed this, like people who
yeah,
I've worked with in the past, and even myself, like it's the feeling of there's something more, and
yeah,
I think
yeah,
not enough people realize that you have it within you to try to just to try something else. You don't have to fall into the same category as every single other person in the world.
you
it's
don't
hard to it's
just
hard to convince yourself, though.
let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Has anybody in your life ever told you or given you the advice of, hey, Justine, why don't you go out there and get yourself a real job? Have you ever
uh,
heard that?
uh, Basically, yeah, kind of along the lines of
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Okay. Never, ever again listen to the advice of put those people on a list. And that's a very special list. Okay. And those are the people you will never listen to
Yeah.
when it comes to fulfilling your goals and your dreams and your aspirations.
The thing that's hard, though, is that so it kind of leads into my next question. When those people are the people that you trust the most. And I think a
Hmm.
lot of people do fall into this category, not necessarily for me, but for, people who I've who
Sure.
I've known, where their families are the ones who are telling them, why are you even trying this? That's stupid, stuff like that. Or their friends and stuff. Even if it's for what they feel like is trying to help out that person. Like, they don't want them to fail. Like, let's say, I have a friend who has spoken about her mom, and her mom, tries to kind of protect her in a way, and she doesn't
Sure.
want her to fail, right? Um, but then she ends up kind of squashing any light or anything that's inside of this friend, because the mother is afraid that she's going to fail. The daughter wants to do it, right? But when it's somebody like that, when it's someone who's close to you, because it's easy if it's someone who you just met on the street and you don't care about them. But if it's someone who is close with you, how do you reconcile that?
Well, first of all, you have to understand and be able to compartmentalize those people in your life
Mm,
as people who mean well. Okay.
yeah.
Uh, they're not people that you're going to discard from your life. They're not the people who you will never speak to again. They're people who mean well and who are there to protect you. Okay.
Yeah.
But they're there to protect you based on their own experiences, based on what they know and
Hmm.
what is in their mind's bank of
Hmm.
information. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, it's the same thing with AI. You feed a whole bunch of information to a machine, and then the machine analyzes it and comes back to you with answers. Well,
Hmm.
these people, okay, built their data bank in their own minds over a lifetime of experiences. Guess what? So have I.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's likely that one day someone's going to ask me a question and I'm going to be negative before I'm positive about it. And maybe I'm not going to be as open minded about it. Okay.
Hmm.
Uh, it's possible. And it's possible. And in every instance, it would be because everyone cares about that person. Okay.
Hmm.
Uh, but and that should give you pause.
Yeah.
But when you take that pause, you need to have a clear enough mind to think for yourself, and say, okay, what can I distill from this person's experiences that I need to hold on to
Mm.
and make sense for me,
Yeah.
and what can I discard? Okay, because it's more negativity that I don't need to clutter my mind with.
Mm. That kind of goes into, I think, what you were mentioning before about how people have to be teachable and stuff like that, and be open to listening. It kind of goes both ways, I guess, in that situation. So it seems like it's important to be teachable, but maybe not to replicate somebody's exact life. And so I think it's definitely something to keep in mind. But it seems kind of difficult, I think, for some people who really do put a lot of their trust and faith into um, these very close relationships. And it almost could feel like, I don't know, but I'm assuming that it could almost feel like they're letting that person down because they don't listen to them, and they don't follow their advice. But it's
Well,
hard. It's hard.
yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah.
Um, and and there's times where um, not that you're going to make a decision that's going to drive you away from family or close people in your life or loved ones,
Yeah.
um, but you kind of need to come back. Almost what I would call the porcupine approach. Somebody throws you a porcupine. What are you going to do with it? You're going to throw it right back at them, or a hot potato. You know,
Yeah.
uh, and you need to at that point, in a polite but stern fashion, express yourself and say, "Hey, look, this is something that I really care about. This
Yeah.
is something that I'm really going to work hard at," and you need to take that moment to sell the idea to
Hmm.
that person
Yeah.
that you know I can't focus on the negativity you're giving me right now. Okay.
Hmm.
So, you know, let's put this aside. Okay. Because it's something that I care about. And no matter what, I'm going to either see it to the end of a failure
Yeah.
or I'm going to see it to follow my dreams. I don't know which of the two is going to come up next, but
Hmm.
wherever it goes, I want to be there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I need your support by at the very least not cutting me up just because I want to try something.
Yeah, yeah, and that seems. I mean, that sounds like really good advice for anything. Like not even following, an interest or something for a business or anything like that. But even just, the first thing that came into my head was maybe when families don't approve of somebody's significant other or something like that. Even something like that. That's what popped into my head. So
Oh yeah.
it seems like very good advice, no matter
Oh yeah.
what.
Oh yeah.
But I'm wondering also, if you don't mind, did you have anyone in your life who was kind of more on that side, who wasn't really being supportive of your dreams? It doesn't
Oh
have to
yeah.
be like a close
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah, no, no, no. There have been people who've
Yeah.
laughed at me my entire life. There's no
Mm,
doubt about that.
yeah.
And I did not take a traditional path.
Yeah.
That's for sure. But there's also a certain resilience that you build over time,
Mm.
where you say to yourself, and I'm going to put my bullseye on a person, okay, my crosshairs, and I'm going to say, I'm going to do this just to prove you wrong. I love you. Okay. There's no reason for me not to love you. Okay.
Yeah.
But one of the goals that I have just set in my life, which has put more fire in my belly than I had before, okay,
Mm,
is that I'm going to do this to prove you wrong.
mm. Yeah. It's funny.
You
I
know,
it's definitely yeah, I mean, I can definitely see that helping somebody too.
but
Especially
I
I
would
like
not
that
say
you
that.
yeah,
I wouldn't
I
say
like
it.
that
I
you
would just do it.
added I like that you added into it too. Like, I love you, but you've just given me a new goal. Because I think sometimes people think it's very, kind of black or white, where you have to, if you're going to go against what somebody says or somebody's advice, then you're just against them and you can't still also feel, loving feelings toward them. But
Mhm.
I think it kind of goes back into the whole conversation pretty much, where it's been a theme of, almost like friendly competition in a way, coming back around in this as well. Like, you've given me this new goal. I love you, but also I'm gonna prove you wrong. So it's kind of
Right.
funny. um, so kind of going back to, I guess, your childhood, if you don't mind me asking. I'm wondering, was there ever a moment back when you were like a young child where you could kind of now, as an adult, as a successful business owner, trace it back to a moment in your childhood where, I don't know, like, not necessarily like everything came together in childhood, but was there a specific moment where you look back now and you're like, okay, it all kind of makes sense. Like, my whole life sort of makes sense.
Well, yeah, it is, and it, I could probably say that for the most part, um, the harder we have to work to earn something, the
Hmm.
more resilient we become.
Yeah.
Okay, uh, to the adversity that we might face in the future.
Hmm.
So, you know, the rich kid who had everything his entire life and never had to even ask for something before it was given to them.
Yeah.
Um, and the kid who got the keys to a brand new BMW as soon as they got his driver's license, um, is far more disadvantaged later
Yeah.
in life.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, when, hey, um, we're not all going to win a ribbon at this, you know, uh, competition called life. We're
Hmm.
not all going um, to succeed.
Hmm.
And you're not going to be recognized just for showing up. So,
Hmm.
I think that at every step in life, the harder you have to work for something, the more you have to strive for something,
Yeah.
uh, the the less easy it is for you. The more at that moment you might hate yourself and you say, I just wish I had a little bit more than I do right now, or I just wish that I didn't have to have that weekend job, uh, and I wish that, or I wish the other, and look at what I'm missing out on.
Yeah.
Um, at that moment, you may feel bummed about it, but later in life, the lessons that you've learned are, uh, uh, magnified. They really
Hmm.
are.
Yeah, and I guess you could kind of pick this up at any point in life, because
Oh,
this this podcast is not like, I don't want it to just be geared towards, the younger generations and stuff, but also, people who might be older and
Mhm.
kind of in a position where they kind of have had this job that they don't really like, but they had to have it because of family or what have you. But they've reached a point now where, maybe, I don't know, maybe their kids are older and they're just over their job and they want to do something new. I want it to be for those people as well. So that kind of leads into a thought about, um, I guess for you, if you hadn't taken that step at that point in your life when your children were young and you had waited, and you were still today in your old job that you had left back then, um, do you think now you would go for it?
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Without a doubt.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
as you shed responsibilities, you look for new opportunities without a doubt.
Mhm.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. And
So
plus you probably would have had other life lessons that you didn't really necessarily go through that could, I guess help you figure out, your a different path maybe. And
mhm.
you could have still sort of maybe ended up in the same, even in the same business, possibly not exactly the same way as we mentioned before. But I think it's important for people to realize because like I've come across a lot of people like older people in my family who were like, oh no, it's too late for me. My life's pretty much over, and I'm like, you're not. You're what? You're like 50 or whatever,
Right.
and it's always been hard for me to wrap my head around. Like I understand where they're coming from, but I wish I like had the, I guess, the experience and the like, wisdom to say, hey, this is not true. So I'm wondering if you have any like words of advice for those people.
Well, look, at the end of the day, it's really a matter of what you want to make of yourself and where
Mhm.
you want to. When do you want to start? If you're not going to start it now, when are you going to start it? What is the one thing that you would do if you were not doing what you're doing right now?
Yeah.
And what is stopping you from doing that? And
Hmm.
analyze the reasons of why you're being stopped, because
Hmm.
only you are stopping you. Nobody else is telling you not to.
Yeah.
Um, and analyze the reasons why you're at that stage where you're saying that you can't do it
Mm.
for XYZ reason. Uh, and then try to figure out, are those reasons valid?
Yeah.
Are you just making excuses because you're scared?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, do you really not want to do that?
Hmm.
Or is there a genuine, real concern? And
Hmm.
if the concern is genuine and real, well then you can't do it now. But when
Yeah.
can you do it? Okay. Or
Hmm.
can you do it a different way so that the two can coexist? You know,
Yeah.
uh, and if it's just you talking yourself out of it, then maybe you don't really want to do it, and you
Mm.
just talk about wanting to do it,
Hmm.
or maybe you should rethink your self-talk.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and and talk yourself into things instead of out of things.
Mm. That's definitely really good advice for anybody, and I feel like, so many people have that negative self-talk in their head, and, we could talk about, I guess, imposter syndrome or anything like that, all the buzzwords and stuff, and I think it's true of young people and people who are like, from 10 to 100, whatever, it doesn't
Oh
matter.
yeah.
I think a lot
Oh
of
yeah.
people have this negative, self-image, and it's only just I feel like I've only just started reading about it recently, where psychologists are saying like how much that really does actually impact you. I mean, I'm sure everyone kind of knows, but I feel like it's coming out in studies like, no, you actually have to talk to yourself in a positive way and see yourself in a positive way. Otherwise, it'll just keep bringing you down.
Completely.
Yeah. So
Completely.
just to kind of wrap it up, I'm wondering. I know you kind of mentioned it, but I'm wondering, what's your future? What does your future hold? What do you want to do? It doesn't actually have to be in relation to your business. I'm curious about professionally. and even, if there's any personal goals you have that you kind of want to state here so that you could hold yourself accountable, maybe stuff like that. I think sometimes that's also very beneficial to voice those things.
Well, I definitely will keep doing what I'm doing as long as I enjoy doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Uh, and there's going to be a time where I still enjoy doing it, but I'm not providing positive benefit.
Hmm.
Um, Either because of my being stuck in my own ways or because of age or a number of things. Um, and I will obviously at that point take another step back.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't see that happening. Okay.
Hmm.
But it could. Uh, where do I see myself? I never see myself as not doing something. Okay.
Yeah.
And I mean in a productive, meaningful work way.
Yeah.
One of the things that I might end up doing in my future, and I definitely think about this a lot. It's not in the frontal lobe of my brain right now, but it could get there eventually. And if I have the economic means to do so in the future, I might. I would like to mentor young businesses, young
Mm.
entrepreneurs. I would
Yeah.
love to be able to give some of my time to businesses, to startups, to ideas, to helping people birth something that they want to do.
Hmm.
Um, I've had the opportunity to speak to people in an environment such as this, not necessarily on a podcast and not on one to one, but I've had the opportunity to speak to young minds, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I would love to be able to do more of it. So yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. I mean, I think so many people would also just, really appreciate that coming from someone like you who has kind of gone through it all and has
Mhm.
the experience and the wisdom. I think that is something that's really important that maybe some I've heard I don't know that I necessarily have a full-on opinion of this, but I've heard this from a lot of my friends who feel like a lot of young people, especially these days, have kind of, I don't know, a negative opinion of listening to the older generations who have actually had this experience and stuff. They don't want to listen, they just want to. They're like, no, you don't know what you're talking about and stuff like that. So it's. I mean, it's sad, I guess. But yeah, I've had many friends come to me and say that they like the idea of kind of what I'm doing and asking people who have been there and who've had those experiences, because so many people supposedly don't actually like to entertain the information that is given to them by others who have had those experiences that they just haven't. And it goes back to what you were saying before about the quote that you said. I think you said you didn't know exactly who said it, but it was something like, what was it? It was that you don't have the time to make the mistakes on your own, so you have to kind of learn from people who have
Yeah,
had
yeah, yeah,
who have made
yeah.
those mistakes, and that's
Correct.
very important.
It
And I
really
think
is.
that, yeah, I think with what you want to do in the future at some point, that's exactly like the embodiment of that. You trying to help people to maybe not make any mistakes that you made, and they'll make their own mistakes,
Sure.
but at least you're saving them some of that time and stuff. And I think that's very admirable as well. So yeah, I guess that about wraps it up. Do you have any other things that you feel like we missed out on that you'd like to mention?
Well, no, and I thank you very, very much. And if you want to do a round two at some point 6 months down the road, I
Yeah.
had a great time, and
Awesome.
I'm sure we can. This was a great conversation, and I'm sure we
Mhm.
can come up with some more material.
Yeah, yeah.
And I not only wish you great success with your podcast, but I can tell you, for one, I will be following you.
Oh, thank you so
No pressure.
much. I
No
I'm so
pressure.
happy that
No
I
pressure.
yeah, I'm so happy that I found you on Instagram because it's so funny. I was like, who could I speak to? And I've always been interested in plants, and I worked as, in horticulture and in floral design. Not as long as horticulture, but I was in floral design for a little bit, and I came across you, so I was looking up you florists. I think I was looking up florists NYC or something like that, and then y'all
Uh,
came up, and it's just been perfect. I feel like. So
Definitely.
I do thank you so much for joining joining me. It, like you said, it's been a very, very entertaining and engaging conversation. And I thank you for all your answers and for taking the time out of your day. Yeah.
It was a pleasure, Justine. Thank you.
Okay. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.